as we know, Donald Trump is facing not one, but multiple investigations. And one of those investigations has to do with his attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election and his part in inciting riots in the nation's capital on January 6th. Now, we have some updates in regard to how the DOJ, under the leadership of Merrick Garland, is approaching this. Still no charges for Donald Trump, but we do now know that dozens of Trump's associates have been subpoenaed by the Justice Department over their alleged involvement in attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election. So more than 30 individuals, according to reporting. And while we literally have about 30% of the country saying that they are willing to use violence in order to win the country back, while we have stories of people trying to undo our democratic process, Glenn Greenwald believes that the real authoritarian threat to America is Joe Biden. And he said as much during an interview with Tucker Carlson. Let's watch.
What is the most overlooked part of the Biden administration is that before January 6th, there was an attempt to import that war on terror, that first war on terror, onto domestic soil. Adam Schiff, one of the most authoritarian members of Congress, in addition to being one of the most pathological liars, had legislation pending that would do nothing but take that first war on terror and make it domestic. And you can look at a Wall Street Journal article on November 15th, 2 months before January 6th, right when Biden was declared the winner, where they said that a top priority of the Biden administration is to reintroduce the war on terror, but this time on domestic soil. So they justify it now in the wake of 1/6, even though before 1/6, this was what they were intending to do as a way of criminalizing their opposition and solidifying authoritarian powers on American soil.
So this is a continuation of the right-wing outrage over Biden referring to Trump supporters as semi-fascists. I wish he just said what the reality is. Just say fascist. It's not, they're going to attack you no matter what. But also, just to clarify what this conversation is really about, the attempts to do something about the very real problem of right-wing extremism within our borders. And that right-wing extremism has played out in incredibly violent ways, including mass shootings like the one in El Paso, Texas, that was inspired and motivated by anti-immigrant sentiment. You also had the conspiracy theorists who believed in white replacement theory shooting up a grocery store in Buffalo. And those are some of the more prominent examples. But we've seen other examples of right-wing extremists and right-wing militias carrying out acts of violence against their political opponents across the country. But according to Glenn Greenwald, that should all be ignored, okay? Because doing anything about it would be authoritarian. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so there's so much to dissect here. So first of all, so trying to lead a coup with literally fake electors, and that was the word used in one of the emails. Let's get fake electors instead of the real electors that the American people selected through our democracy. That is not authoritarianism. Trying to overthrow our democracy is not authoritarianism, according to Glenn Greenwald, because he's now getting paid by the right wing. But Joe Biden saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't allow these guys to do massive violence within the country is somehow authoritarianism. Now, look, if you've got specifics, Glenn, okay, for example, this is why Glenn turning into a sellout clown that goes and dances on Fox News is so disgusting, because in the past, he did great reporting. So you got warrantless wiretapping that Biden is doing, then report it out. And I'll be the first one to say it's outrageous. I hate it. I don't like it if Bush does it. I don't like it if Obama does it. So great. We'll be back on board, okay? But you don't have that. You have, of course, as always, with everything on Tucker Carlson's show, no context. They never tell you the other side, right? So they don't tell you, oh, the reason why they were looking to domestic terrorists is because there were people planning to blow up buildings in Kansas, going into, as you all know, I hope some of you know, going to synagogues and murdering Jewish people for just being Jews. People going into black churches and murdering them. I mean, on and on and on of all these mass shootings and massacres, all by right-wingers, all saying, I'm trying to start a civil war, trying to start a race war, et cetera, et cetera. But if you watch Tucker Carlson's show, you'll never know that. If you now read or watch Glenn Greenwald, you'll never know that, because he'll just turn around and go, "Can you believe the guy investigating the murderers? He's the authoritarian." Okay? But the poor right wing, oh my God, they were just trying to murder you. What's the big deal? And they were trying to overthrow democracy. That's not authoritarian. So he's become absolutely disgusting, let alone, this constant, Anna, as you know, the general idea of, I'm never going to criticize Republicans. I'm just going to go and do whatever Tucker Carlson demands of me. I'm going to bow my head and pretend Democrats are the problem. If he hit Democrats as well as Republicans, none of this would be an issue. And if he was honest. But look at the dishonest framing here.
Right, exactly. I mean, look, I think that it is a worthwhile cause to be hesitant toward any effort by the federal government to beef up the security state, the surveillance state. I think that that is a valid critique, a valid concern. However, he's talking about this in the context of a very real problem that the country is currently grappling with, and that is right-wing violence. I mean, it's so prevalent among the right wing at this point in terms of that ideology that they willy-nilly admit in polling that they are willing to use violence in order to get what they want politically. That is insane. And it's easy for someone who lives in another country in a secure compound with all these security guards to make these arguments on Tucker Carlson's show, which of course isn't going to affect him. It's going to affect all of us living within the United States and having to deal with these ever-growing right-wing militias. And as I've said a million times on the show, and I want to repeat again, look, I think that they should be held accountable, especially if they're planning to carry out acts of violence, if they have already carried out acts of violence and terrorized various diverse communities across this country. But at the same time, there needs to be a more comprehensive approach, which is, what is persuading such a huge portion of the country to engage in this culture of hate, right? And it's because they're angry. It's because they want to blame others for the pain and suffering that they might be experiencing. Not all of them. Let me be clear. There are certainly wealthy conservatives who engage in all sorts of bad behavior, including acts of violence, as part of the right wing. But how are they able to recruit people into their militias, into their groups? And we need to address those issues as well, in addition to ensuring that, yeah, we do something as a deterrent to discourage people from carrying out these acts of violence in the first place. And by the way, going back to the idea of authoritarianism and all of that, I mean, we have a democratic process that is deeply flawed, okay? But it is some measure of democracy that we should be fighting to protect. And instead of wanting to fight to protect that, Glenn Greenwald is on that show freaking out about Joe Biden, of all people, being an authoritarian. Joe Biden, who can't stop saying complimentary things about the Republican Party. Okay. And let me go back to the subpoenas for more than 30 of Trump's associates. Just to give you some more clarity on that, the Justice Department is examining how money was raised and spent on alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election, efforts to submit fake alternate electors to Congress from states lost by Trump, and the Stop the Steal rally held at the Ellipse, adjacent to the White House grounds on January 6th, just before the Capitol riot. Again, these are subpoenas by the Justice Department to over 30 people. And this is also separate from the investigation into Trump's handling of classified documents. Just a few more details, because one of the lawyers representing some of the individuals who received the subpoena has some thoughts about this. Virginia-based attorney David Warrington, who said he represents approximately a dozen clients who have been issued subpoenas, said the FBI was, quote, very professional when serving his clients. He added that the subpoenas his clients received are nearly identical, describing them as lengthy documents divided into sections and subsections. They cover issues related to alternate electors and election certification deadlines on December 14th and January 6th, fundraising by the Save America PAC, and the January 6th Stop the Steal rally, but not the ensuing riot. The subpoenas require individuals to provide documents and any communication between themselves and Trump allies like Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, and Bernie Kerik. So.
Okay. So, look, two things here, Anna. First, on those fake electors investigation, that I don't want that to get buried, because there's great news in the quote that you just read, right? Because what I've been complaining about is January 6th committee in the House is focusing on the rioters, and all the prosecution so far is focusing on the people who broke into the Capitol. But those are the low-level guys. Those are the foot soldiers. And that's not the real coup. They could have never held the Capitol, right? The real coup was in the fake electors. So the fact that this investigation involving all of these people who have been subpoenaed is about the electors and not the riots is great news, okay? Because that's going after the big dogs, and that's going after the actual coup itself, which could have worked if they had actually executed it as planned. So now back to Glenn for a second. Look, guys, I've got no interest in trading my civil liberties for security. I think it's a false choice, okay? Mm-hmm. But Glenn shows no evidence of Biden taking away our civil liberties. He just says, oh, can you believe that he's investigating people? But wait a minute, if you have a warrant, you are supposed to investigate criminals. If you're doing it illegally without a warrant, or you're taking away people's civil liberties, then I'm on your side. I don't want anybody doing that, Republican or Democrat. But he has no evidence of that. He just says, can you believe he's investigating people in America? Yeah, that's called law enforcement. I know the right wing now hates it, but that's what it is. And I said, Glenn's getting paid for these opinions. And I don't know if it's by tonnage or just level of absurdity or how much he lies. But look, he said it. He's joined Rumble, Peter Thiel's platform, and he said he's getting well into the six digits. So I guess that's close to $1 million or whatever. And so that's where he's getting this, like, all of a sudden newfound interest in defending every Republican and everything that Trump does and only attacking Democrats. And by the way, if you were concerned about Biden calling people semi-fascist like corporate media and right-wing media, Donald Trump called Democrats fascists. Our reporter Matthew Sheffield found a clip of him doing that, surrounded by the military in 2020. Yet nobody says it. Does Tucker Carlson come out or Anderson Cooper come out and say, what do you mean Trump said worse? It's right there. It's right there. No, they're like, oh, Biden is bad, but Trump is the beloved. So that's who Glenn Greenwald's turned into. And it's, as usual, unfortunately, pathetic.
I mean, that's just the nature of political discourse in this country at this point. I mean, we might as well just call it the United States of bad faith. Like, it's just, it's totally okay if Trump does it. But if Biden accurately states what's going on with some members of the Republican Party, oh my God, how dare he? It's part of the reason why Democrats are incredibly weak. They get attacked viciously if they dare to speak the truth on these issues.